Hi YouTube, Darth here. The masses have spoken, and today I'm looking at the M1911 versus the Compact 45 in today's Sidearm Showdown. Both of these weapons have some pretty similar characteristics, and at first glance, I didn't really see a big difference between the two. However, once I started playing with them, the differences became very apparent, and today I'll be talking about my experiences with them. So first, I want to talk about my impressions of these two weapons before coming into this video. I'm quite familiar with the M1911 as it was one of my favorite pistols in Battlefield 3. I was happy to see it returning into Battlefield 4 and I love its look and its classic feel. I've run with the M1911 a few times before today's episode and I never really gravitated to it as it always seemed to get beat by other pistols. As for the Compact 45, I'm looking at my stats and figuring that I probably shot this weapon once or twice before moving on to something else. I've mentioned this before, but I tend to prefer weapons that stand out pretty remarkably, and like the M1911, I've never been terribly impressed with the Compact 45 enough to switch to it full time. Looking at the community favorites from BF4stats.com, we can see that the Compact 45 is definitely preferred over the M1911. The nostalgia factor apparently isn't enough to win over the community at large. So let's take a look at how these two weapons match up against one another in a stat battle. Both weapons have the exact same damage model at 36.6 maximum damage and 15.4 minimum. Both weapons drop off in the same fashion, starting at 8 meters and damage finally hitting the minimum at 40 meters. On normal mode, this means roughly 3 to 4 shots to kill with both weapons at the closest range and 7 to 8 shots at the maximum range. Keep those bullets required to kill in mind because they're going to be important shortly. Both weapons have roughly the same rate of fire, with the Compact 45 slightly edging out the M1911 at 320 rounds per minute versus the M1911's 310. The rate of fire difference is pretty trivial. For most players, you're not going to notice the difference in rate of fire between the two weapons, but it does mean that the theoretical minimum time to kill of the Compact 45 is slightly less, by about 12 milliseconds. The most statistically significant difference between these two weapons is in the number of rounds each weapon carries. The Compact 45 carries the larger magazine between the two with 10 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber for a total of 11 rounds. The Compact 45 pays for this advantage by carrying 2 less magazines than the M1911 or 4 less bullets overall. So you can run your ammo out, but it's not common. The M1911 carries just 7 rounds in the magazine, meaning a total of 8 rounds when fully loaded. This leads to a pretty huge difference in how the two weapons play. Remember when I said to keep the bullets required to kill in mind? Well, here it is. When it can take up to 8 rounds to kill an enemy, and if you haven't put a bullet in the chamber of the M1911 after a reload, you can see how that might be a problem. The M1911 only carries, at most, 8 rounds. This is a problem the Compact 45 does not have. This is really the worst part about the M1911. The ammunition load means that you don't have the capacity to deal with missed shots or even a second enemy. Having a second enemy appear means you pretty much die as you'll run out of ammo killing the first target. Or best case, you'll only get a few rounds into the second. Overall, the M1911 is a more accurate weapon and expects you to use that accuracy to land headshots. The M1911 has a higher maximum range of 465 meters to the Compact 45's 405 meters. The M1911 has better overall recoil with less upwards recoil, and its initial spread while aiming down sights is half that of the Compact 45. But realistically, these accuracy bonuses matter very little for a weapon that drops off to 15.4 damage at range and performs better in close to mid-range overall. So what does the M1911 do particularly well? As I said, it has that ability to be accurate at middling ranges that the Compact 45 does not quite do as well, at least not over the course of an entire magazine. While I wouldn't recommend replacing your primary with the M1911, it can certainly get the job done slightly better than a 9mm pistol at a similar range. And that's sort of where the M1911 and Compact 45 live. They're not quite as damaging a sidearm as the Magnum pistols, and they're not as weak as the 9mm pistols. They're a sort of middle ground. But where the M1911 gets a bit of a kick is in the hardcore game mode. On this particular game mode, its up-close damage means it's a 1-shot headshot and every other shot is a 2-shot kill. At most, it's a 4-shot kill. Because it fires faster than the Magnums, it's definitely one of the best sidearms for hardcore. It also doesn't suffer from its ammo reserve problem as much on hardcore as you have the capacity to deal with multiple targets and some reserve for missing as well. But again, the only advantage over the Compact 45 is that you have a bit more accuracy when quickly letting off an entire magazine. As for the Compact 45, I was actually pretty shocked as to what a difference that ammo capacity made on normal mode. I was able to finish off multiple targets on a single magazine, something that is extremely rare with the M1911. Furthermore, the range handicap versus the M1911 wasn't really that penalizing if I stood my ground and took time to land my shots. And given the ranges that most engagements with these two weapons happened at, accuracy didn't really represent a big difference in their performance. If I were to add attachments to either weapon, I think only a laser sight for either is necessary, as it gives an added benefit to hipfire. You might desire to attach a heavy barrel to either of these pistols, but it's not really going to give you a huge advantage over their basic characteristics, and they're not particularly good at damage at their maximum range, so pistol sniping is not advised. For two weapons that are so similar in characteristics, I didn't expect to have such a night and day opinion of them. It really came down to how they performed in close quarters. Both could consistently win me a single battle, and only one of the two weapons was capable to win a second battle. So in a sidearm showdown of the M1911 versus the Compact 45, which one do I think is better? Well, a clear winner emerged, and the winner was most definitely the Compact 45. And the 3 extra bullets are really the margin of victory on this weapon. A few more bullets for missed shots, a few more bullets for that extra enemy coming around the corner. Both weapons reload at a blazing 1.2 seconds, but sometimes that's just not fast enough, particularly when enemies have CQB guns drawn on you at less than 10 meters. I don't think there's a lot of margin for error when it comes to the M1911, and I think it's kind of strange that the weapon lacks a significant enough difference to overcome the very similar Compact 45. Honestly, both of these weapons occupy the same niche, and I'm really not sure why DICE originally put them both in the same game. Now, the difference between these weapons pretty much dissolve in hardcore, and I think if you were playing that game mode, I might actually prefer the M1911 over the Compact 45, but not by a whole lot. Again, you still have that ammo advantage with the Compact 45, it's just not as pronounced, and the M1911 remains slightly more accurate when aiming down sights and pulling off multiple rounds. Overall, for normal, I think the Compact 45 is just good enough to edge out any desire to ever use the M1911. Unless of course you're going for style points, and I do so love the M1911. But I'd love to hear from you folks. What's your favorite of these two weapons, the M1911 or the Compact 45? Hash it out in the comments below. But before you go, choose 2 sidearms you'd like to see on the next Sidearm Showdown, and I'll review the top comment from this episode. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.